Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful, real-life tales that touch the heart and teach us invaluable lessons. Today's story is one of love, betrayal, and unexpected revelations. It's about Sarah, who found herself caught in a web of deceit spun by the people she loved most, her mother-in-law and sister-in-law. As a seemingly innocent birthday gift turned into a nightmare, Sarah had to confront a shocking truth that changed her life forever. Stay with us as we dive into this emotional journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to start the story today. I still remember the first time I met Carol Miller, my mother-in-law. Ethan had warned me that his mother was a bit of a challenge. But nothing could have prepared me for the tension that would slowly, but surely, cloud the early days of our marriage. There was something about her, an invisible wall she seemed to erect. Even when she smiled, it was as though she was constantly judging me, scrutinizing my every move, and no matter how hard I tried to be the loving, devoted wife, nothing I did seemed to win her over. At first, I thought it was just nerves. After all, meeting the family for the first time is always nerve-wracking. But as time went on, I realized that her coldness wasn't just a matter of shyness or first impressions. It was something deeper, something more ingrained in her character. I had always known that family was important to Ethan, and I respected that. His bond with his mother, especially, was something he cherished, but what I didn't anticipate was the extent to which that bond would come between us. I wanted to be a part of his life, to fit into the world he had created before me, but Carol never made me feel like I belonged. No matter how much I smiled, no matter how much I tried to impress her, there was always a sense of distance, a gap between us that I couldn't bridge. I'll never forget the time I was preparing for my birthday dinner. Ethan had suggested we spend it with his family, at Carol's house. "It'll be nice," he had said. "Mom wants to celebrate your birthday, and she's been really eager to see us." That should have been a sign, shouldn't it? But I went along with it. For Ethan, I was willing to make an effort, to ignore the unease I felt every time Carol would make a snide remark. Or Vanessa, her daughter, would give me that look, a look that spoke volumes without saying a word. As I sat in our apartment, working on a new website design for a client, the phone rang. I could hear Ethan's voice calling from the living room, his tone light, but with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "Honey, there's a message from my mom. She wants to know if we'd like to have dinner at her place next Sunday. She wants to celebrate your birthday." I felt the familiar pang of discomfort in my chest. I hadn't been looking forward to this. Not because I didn't want to spend time with Ethan, but because I knew what it meant. More of Carol's passive-aggressive remarks. More of Vanessa's icy stares. Still, I didn't want to disappoint Ethan, so I nodded and said, "I'll go if you want to." Ethan, ever the optimist, smiled. "Wonderful. Mom's really started to accept you. You'll see." I could see the happiness in his eyes. But deep down, I was doubtful. It had been 3 years since we got married, and in all that time, I had never felt a genuine warmth from Carol. Sure, she'd been polite, but there was always a hidden agenda behind her words. A criticism veiled behind a compliment. And Vanessa, her daughter, was no better. "Is Vanessa coming too?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Of course," Ethan replied casually. "She's been living with Mom since college." I frowned. Vanessa had never liked me. From the moment I met her, I could see the jealousy in her eyes. I was the one who had married Ethan, the one who had taken him away from the family she believed should be her own. She had always treated me as an outsider, and I couldn't understand why Ethan never saw it. But I went along with it, because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You endure the discomfort for them. You push through the awkwardness and pretend everything is fine, even when it's not. The conversation drifted, and eventually, we agreed that I wouldn't need to bring anything. Carol had everything prepared. Of course, she also mentioned she had a special present for me. I forced a smile. The last time she'd said that, she'd given me a sweater 3 sizes too small. I couldn't help but think this birthday would be no different. I tried not to let my cynicism show. Later, as I was preparing dinner in our kitchen, Ethan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around me in a warm embrace. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly. "Your mom," I replied honestly. Ethan sighed. "Are we starting this again? She just wants to get along with you. She really does." I stopped myself from arguing back. This conversation had become a regular occurrence over the past 3 years. Ethan, who could make sharp decisions at work, was blind when it came to his family. He couldn't see the manipulation in his mother's words, the subtle way she tried to control everything. For him, Carol was the perfect mother. And if there were any problems, they must be on my side. "I'm just tired," I said quietly. I wasn't angry, just weary. So much of our relationship had been overshadowed by this tension, this invisible barrier between me and his family. Ethan kissed my forehead, a gesture that was meant to comfort. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. Little did I know, this birthday dinner would mark a turning point in our lives, one that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love. The day of my birthday arrived with a bright, clear sky, but the heaviness in my chest remained. As I prepared breakfast in our apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Despite my efforts to push it aside, a sense of dread gnawed at me. The truth was, I didn't want to go to Carol's house. But I had promised Ethan I would. He was excited, hopeful that this would be the turning point in his mother and me finally getting along. It was hard to deny how much he wanted it. How much he wanted to believe things could be different. The intercom rang, pulling me from my thoughts. A delivery. I opened the door, surprised to find a package addressed to me. From Carol. The box was elegant, black with gold lettering that read, Chateau Chocolatier. I froze. This was no ordinary gift. Chateau Chocolatier was Boston's most luxurious chocolate shop. The chocolates inside were known to be exquisite, costing more than any chocolate I had ever received. Ethan came rushing out of the bathroom, towel in hand, his face lighting up at the sight of the package. "Wow, Mom's really being generous. These chocolates must have cost over $100, he said, clearly impressed. I forced a smile, trying to hide the unease bubbling inside me. "It's thoughtful, I suppose." He eagerly opened the box, revealing an assortment of beautifully shaped chocolates, neatly arranged. There was a small card attached, in Carol's meticulous handwriting, "Specially selected just for you." The words seemed sincere, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I glanced at Ethan, and the joy on his face only made me feel more uneasy. How could Carol have suddenly become so kind, so generous? "She's really trying," Ethan said, oblivious to my thoughts. "It's a sign, right? She's finally accepted you." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Something about the situation felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I just smiled and said, "It's very thoughtful. I'll try them later." We spent the rest of the day in a somewhat forced cheerfulness. Ethan, as usual, was blissfully unaware of the tension that simmered beneath the surface. He was convinced that Carol had finally come around. That night, he cooked a special birthday dinner for me, his enthusiasm evident in every little detail. The evening seemed perfect, but there was still that underlying sense of dread that I couldn't shake. After dinner, Ethan, in his typical laid-back fashion, cleaned up while I relaxed on the couch. I was tired, the kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them again, Ethan had returned to the living room, chocolate box in hand. "How about some dessert?" he asked, grinning. "These look delicious." I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I'm full. Maybe tomorrow." Ethan, unbothered, grabbed a piece and popped it in his mouth. "Just one won't hurt, right?" he said, grabbing another and savoring it. I watched as he continued eating, one chocolate after another, until there was only a handful left. I told myself it didn't matter. It wasn't like I was particularly interested in the chocolates anyway. But as the night passed and I drifted into a restless sleep, a sense of unease settled deeper in my chest. The next morning, I woke up to find Ethan already up, reading the newspaper in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in hand. His face was pale, his eyes tired, but I assumed it was just from the late-night chocolate indulgence. I was about to head to the living room to try those chocolates myself when I noticed the empty box on the table. "Ethan, did you eat them all?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He looked at me with a sheepish grin. "Sorry, I got carried away. They were really good, though." I couldn't stop. I felt a pang of disappointment but didn't voice it. "That's okay. You can buy me more sometime," I replied, trying to push the irritation aside. Just then, the phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Carol. A strange feeling washed over me as I picked up the phone. "Hello, Carol." Her voice came through the line, brighter than usual. "Good morning, dear. How was your birthday? Did you enjoy the chocolates?" "Actually, Ethan ate them all," I said with a laugh. "He really liked them." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before Carol's voice trembled slightly. "Are you serious?" Her tone shifted from cheerful to something else. Something darker, and I immediately felt a chill. "Yes. He ate them all last night. He said they were delicious." "I see." Her voice had taken on a strange, almost fearful quality. "That's unexpected." The conversation ended awkwardly, and I couldn't help but feel a growing suspicion. Why had Carol reacted so strangely? Something wasn't right. As I tried to push the odd conversation from my mind, I couldn't shake the unease that continued to gnaw at me. What had been in those chocolates? Why was Carol so insistent on sending them? I tried to calm myself, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The day had barely begun, but the events of the past 24 hours were already weighing heavily on me. Ethan's condition had worsened rapidly, and I couldn't ignore the strange connection between his sudden illness and those chocolates. I had called an ambulance in a panic as soon as I saw him vomiting violently, his face pale and covered in sweat. I couldn't comprehend what was happening, but one thing was certain: something was terribly wrong. The paramedics arrived quickly, their calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the chaos in my mind. As they loaded Ethan into the ambulance, I clutched his hand tightly, whispering comforting words that I didn't fully believe. "It's going to be okay, Ethan. We'll get you to the hospital, and you'll be fine." But the truth was, I wasn't sure. The ambulance ride was a blur. My mind raced with questions, but none of them had any answers. I couldn't help but think back to the chocolates. Could they have been the cause of his condition? Had Carol sent something laced with poison? Or was it all just a terrible coincidence? Once at the hospital, the doctors worked quickly, trying to stabilize Ethan. I sat in the sterile waiting room, my hands trembling as I filled out the necessary paperwork. As I glanced at my phone, I noticed 5 missed calls from Carol. I didn't want to talk to her. Not right now. Not when I was already so terrified. But then, just as I was beginning to calm down, the phone rang again. It was her. "Where is Ethan? Why isn't he answering his phone?" Carol's voice was high-pitched, panicked, almost hysterical. "He's in the hospital," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my insides were churning. "He's very sick. The doctors are trying to help him." I didn't understand why she was so upset. Why was she acting as if she were the one who should be the most concerned? I couldn't shake the feeling that something about her panic didn't feel genuine. Still, I told her which hospital we were at, and she promised she would be there soon. About half an hour later, Carol and Emily arrived at the hospital. Carol was visibly shaken, her face pale and full of worry, while Emily stood beside her, a scowl etched across her face. As soon as they saw me, their eyes locked with mine, and I could tell something had changed in their demeanor. There was fear now, the same fear that had started to consume me. I stood up to meet them, my heart pounding in my chest. "Where is he?" Carol asked, her voice shaky. "Is he okay?" "He's in the treatment room," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "The doctors are taking care of him." Before I could say more, a doctor appeared, holding a file. "Mrs. Collins," he said, addressing Carol, "we have the initial test results for your husband. He's showing signs of severe food poisoning. But there's something unusual about it. We believe he may have ingested something toxic. We're conducting further tests. Toxic? The word sent a chill down my spine. My mind raced. Could it be the chocolates? Was it possible that Carol's gift was more than just a sweet gesture? The doctor continued to speak. But my thoughts were a blur. I barely heard him. The detective arrived soon after, identifying himself as someone who needed to ask a few questions. Carol's face drained of color as he asked about the chocolates. He seemed to think they might hold the key to Ethan's condition. I wanted to scream, to accuse Carol right then and there. But I held myself together. For Ethan, we need to investigate your apartment, the detective said, looking directly at Carol. Do you still have the box? Carol hesitated. It's probably thrown out, she said, her voice trembling. Emily quickly volunteered to go back to our apartment to search for the packaging. I gave her the address, my heart pounding in my chest. What would she find? Was this all a terrible mistake? Or had Carol truly done something unspeakable? The doctor's words echoed in my mind, toxic reaction. And the more I thought about it, the more it seemed likely that Carol had orchestrated something far darker than I had imagined. An hour later, Emily returned empty-handed. I couldn't find the box, she said. Maybe it was thrown away after all. But that was when everything started to shift. The detective, now suspicious, began questioning everyone more intensely. It was clear that he didn't believe the story they were telling. After more questions and more evasions, the truth began to unfold. When the detective went to search our apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting closer to something terrifying. Was Carol truly capable of this? Had she planned to hurt me? Or even kill me, all along? The hours in the hospital passed like days. Every moment felt longer than the last. But the truth, however dark, was beginning to reveal itself. And when it did, I knew I would never look at my family the same way again. As the days passed, everything seemed to fall into place, albeit in the most painful and surreal way. After a tense investigation, the police confirmed that the chocolates had been laced with a powerful toxin, one that could have killed Ethan if not for the swift medical intervention. Carol and Emily were arrested, and their motives were revealed. Carol, it turned out, had been driven by greed, manipulating her son's life insurance and planning to inherit everything if he were to die. Vanessa, her accomplice, had been her unwilling participant, caught between loyalty to her mother and the reality of what they had done. Ethan's recovery was slow but steady. Each day he regained a bit more strength. But the emotional toll was harder to heal. The man I married had never fully seen the extent of his family's toxic grip. Now, he was left grappling with the truth, and the betrayal of those he had always trusted most. After the trial, Carol was sentenced to 5 years in prison, while Vanessa received a suspended sentence for her role in the plot. Ethan and I left Boston, moving to a small, quiet town far from the life we had known. In the peaceful suburbs, we began to rebuild, together. Slowly, step by step. There were no more dark clouds hanging over our heads. But the scars remained. I'd learned a valuable lesson. One that was hard to accept. Sometimes, the people closest to you can hurt you the most. But in the end, love is stronger than betrayal. And together, we would face whatever life threw our way. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more life-changing stories that reveal the deepest emotions and the lessons we all can learn.